How you guys all doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga. Today is Monday, September the 9th. We already have our first NFL Sunday past us. The week is still going on, though, with the game set to kick off in about an hour and a half with the Jets taking on the San Francisco 49ers over there in San Francisco. On today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about that game, previewing it in all of its totality, some of the matchups, some last-minute information on it, and I'll be giving you guys my predictions on who I think is going to win. Also, we couldn't have this program without talking about the Cowboys, right? And Dak Prescott agreeing to that contract extension. We're going to get into all of that, plus some more storylines from all the craziness that happened over the weekend, so stay tuned for all of that stuff coming up. But also, before we get started, as always, if you guys have any questions, any comments or opinions you'd like to share, your input is always a big part of what makes this show great, and we thrive on your energy and insights. So whether it's a quick comment, like I said, a thoughtful question, or an opinion you'd like to share, don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. Now, if you want to make it absolutely sure your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that. Use the Super Chat feature just by clicking the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel, and we rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting. And if you do prefer, also, we still have that alternative option, the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. By using that, you can still tip and donate and still drop your question and or comment using that method if you still prefer using that. We couldn't do this show without you and your amazing support, and we're always so thankful to you guys anytime you're able to help us out with that new Super Chat feature in the chat box. But now we can start to break down a little bit of what happened over this weekend, right? A lot of it was just on the field, which is great, right? We finally have some football, but we have to talk about some of the information, some of the breaking news off of the field, right? Because it has a big implication on what is going to happen ultimately in this season, right? And going forward. And one of those pieces of news was Dak Prescott, right? Finally, very unlikely, very surprising to me. I didn't think that this would get done, but obviously the Cowboys and Dak Prescott came to terms on a new 4-year, $240 million extension, $231 million guaranteed to Dak Prescott, $1 million more than that huge amount of guaranteed money that Deshaun Watson got, now making Dak Prescott the quarterback with the most amount of guaranteed money, or just player in general, to get the most guaranteed money ever in the history of the NFL. And also, if you just do a little bit of the math, $60 million per year, just based on the 4 years, $240 million, obviously. He also gets a huge $80 million signing bonus as well, which is also the largest ever as well for any player in NFL history. And Dak obviously becomes the new highest paid quarterback currently in the NFL, surpassing Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, Jordan Love, all of those guys at $55 million. Dak jumps ahead of all those guys, and now we're here, right? Now we're here with this news breaking early Sunday morning, and just before all the games. I had already been in the mindset since Friday, since we last talked about how this season was going to go for the Cowboys, how the lack of contract could affect Dak going forward, and whether or not this was going to be the last year for Dak and the Cowboys. I felt that it should have been, but obviously now that's out the window. Now they're tied together for at least another 4 years after this year. So, it is all said and done now. It's I like it in a sense that, this deal for Dak Prescott, $60 million, regardless if you think he deserves it or not, it's just how the market plays out at this point in time. The next quarterback, whether it be Brock Purdy or whoever else comes after that, how much money they get, if Brock goes crazy this year, he could be in line of making 60, 61 or something like that. It's just how the market goes. It's not really based on who deserves it or not. It's just based on how much that quarterback really is valued for their team. And right now, if you look at this Dallas Cowboys team, yes, I felt that they needed a fresh start with everything, but also with that comes the consequence of you're not going to have a quarterback for the next couple years, and how far back would that set you if you're the Cowboys, if you already extended CeeDee Lamb, if you want to extend Micah Parsons, if you want to continue to hang around the rim, per se, like the Cowboys say that they do. You need a quarterback that's been playing great over the last few years. So because you extend CeeDee Lamb, I didn't really buy any other reports or anything like that that said that you still don't sign Dak Prescott and you could use CeeDee Lamb as an asset to trade for maybe your next quarterback. That just seemed unnecessary to me. If you're going to extend CeeDee Lamb and then trade him, that didn't make too much sense. So now we're here with Dak, and, with this deal coming on Sunday early in the early windows, the Cowboys didn't play until the 4 o'clock window, so there was enough time to get all of this out of the way. And that's one of the big points about this, right? All the money talk and all the rumors about Dak leaving potentially after this year, along with maybe Mike McCarthy if they fire him or extend him maybe at the end of this year. All of that is now out the window because you're able to secure Dak and CeeDee Lamb now for the foreseeable future. And I think the Cowboys feel most comfortable now that they're able to have at least two other most important players on this team. And I think they're going to be satisfied with whatever happens, right? Because it's lose if you do it or not. You're in a lose situation if you extend Dak right now, or if you don't extend them, you're also in a lose situation, right? Because say they get eliminated again in the first round of the playoffs, people are going to look back at this decision and say, maybe you shouldn't have extended him. Maybe you should have just moved on because Dak's not going to be that guy and now you're locked to him for another 4 to 5 years. That's going to be a bad situation, however people spin it. But if you decide to move on from Dak, then the story's going to be, right, you shouldn't have let him go. He was a good quarterback in the regular season. You should have just kept trying to give him another chance. Now you don't have another quarterback, right? You were in a tough spot regardless, so now at least all of that is out of the way, and now there's no real point in looking back on it. It's already done, and hopefully it works out for the Cowboys now. But touching on some of the games a little bit that just happened on this extension and on the Dallas Cowboys, right? Dak gets his money, and then right away, just 4 hours later, he has to play against the Cleveland Browns. And right off the bat, based on the performance, winning 33-17 against the Cleveland Browns in hostile environment, it's a great start. It's a great start for validating that contract. And Dak said the same thing after the game, right? He said, obviously, that he's not thinking about the money, that he's just wanting to hold up his end of the contract. And that's a great way to do it. Yeah, they didn't play an amazing game, like Dak threw for like 400 yards and like 3 touchdowns, but they did enough. The scoreline, I think, was a little bit more flattering to the Cleveland Browns. It really, from start to finish, from the first couple drives, you saw how the Cowboys and Dak were looking pretty comfortable and were not really being affected too much by that Cleveland Browns pass rush and just the defense overall, which is very good. It looked like the Cowboys came in with a great plan, great execution on the part of Dak Prescott, and they got out of there with a win where I thought that it was not going to go like that at all. 2 quarterbacks that had a lot of pressure on them. Dak showed up in hostile environment, I'll say it again, and showed out, played very well for all the circumstances, right? Getting that last-minute contract and everything like that. And now they're just on this journey together, right? Him, the Cowboys, going hand on hand. And the expectations now, for Dak and this contract don't really change too much if we look forward a little bit more. It's still, regardless of how the regular season goes, I think people are just going to be looking to the playoffs, obviously, with Dak. And there's no real question of whether or not the regular season is going to work out well for Dak and the Cowboys. I think most people would assume that their roster, especially after this first game and how they game plan for it, I think most people are going to see this Cowboys team as a playoff team or right there on the fringe of it with other teams that are looking very good. But it's all just going to stem from those playoff victories, if they get them or not, and whether or not they're able to change that narrative a little bit, because the NFC is very good. The NFC is very tough just by the looks of it right now. And once they get into the dance, right, once they make it into the real games, into the playoffs, depending on if they have home field advantage or something like that, that's really where this contract, and that's really where you want to see the results pan out. The regular season, again, they're probably going to do a decent job. I had them finishing third in the division. There's still a long ways to go, but, we'll see where this goes from Dak. It's not going to really be put to the test until the playoffs, and that's when everyone's going to make their final judgment on it. But Dak, now the new highest paid quarterback in the NFL. It was, again, pretty surprising just because it came from the Cowboys, in my opinion. I thought he was going to move on and get it from a different team, but evidently not. The Cowboys are now tied to him. I just hope it wasn't a case of, they felt that they just had to do this because they need a quarterback to just be relevant. I didn't want it to be that case. Rather, I wanted them to sign him because they felt that Dak could be the guy to take them forward and finally get over that hump. If they still don't believe that and they just signed him for the fact that they don't want to lose a great quarterback, then we're just going to have the same old Cowboys, right? And nothing's going to change. So once the playoffs hits, we're going to see what really has changed and if this Cowboys team has taken a step forward or not. But that's still months away. We're only just through the first week of the NFL. And on that note, we're going to move on from this topic, and after the break, we're going to look into the game tonight, previewing the matchup between the Jets and the San Francisco 49ers, the last game of Week 1. It should be a good one. Aaron Rodgers, Brock Purdy, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, all the stars are going to be out tonight. I'm going to give you some key predictions, some matchups, and key factors that could affect the outcome of tonight's matchup. So don't go anywhere. A lot more to come on today's show. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to get into a little bit more of the game tonight before we start recapping some of the bigger stories from yesterday, because there were a lot of them. But I wanted to talk about the game tonight here just for a moment, just for this segment, just because it's going to be a good one. It's going to be a good matchup for a lot of reasons, right? The Jets are traveling across the country to Aaron Rodgers' home state to take on the 49ers on the first edition of Monday Night Football tonight, set to kick off at 8:15 Eastern Time. Aaron Rodgers, first game after a year off because of that ruptured Achilles injury, and now basically with this Jets team starting a new season, starting with a lot new excitement, but basically the same team that comes over from last year, right? It was just missing the quarterback with Aaron Rodgers being hurt. Now, hopefully we can meet these expectations and we can finally see all these answers that have been kept from us for a whole year, right? With Aaron Rodgers getting injured so early on in the year, that whole season was pretty much chalked up to nothing for the Jets. And now it's the time to put up, really, or shut up in this matchup, because you're going up against the representative from the NFC. And if there was ever a time for really either of these teams to make a statement, it would be with this matchup, just because the 49ers, also from their standpoint, have been dealing with a lot this offseason, a lot of stuff off of the field. Brandon Ayuk, right, obviously, Trent Williams, and Christian McCaffrey also not being able to practice. All those guys should be ready to go in this matchup. And finally, like I said, after a bunch of stuff just circling around for weeks and weeks and weeks, I think people just wanted it to end rather than have it favor them in any other way. I think people just wanted to see it end, and now finally the 49ers can focus on football and start talking about, we're only in September, only the first week of the regular season, but this team is really Super Bowl or bust at this point, and they need all of their attention now, starting from this game and going forward. So that's pretty much the overview of it. Getting more into the specifics of each team, looking at the New York Jets here. Their first game obviously going to be on the road in San Francisco. Their first look at a new offensive line for them, with Morgan Moses coming over at right tackle, Tyron Smith, their new left tackle as well, and John Simpson coming over from the Baltimore Ravens for one of their guard spots on their offensive line, right? That's a pretty formidable offensive line now with those three guys, Elijah Vera Tucker and their center who's escaping my mind. And it's just a completely different look now from last year, where I know Rodgers didn't play, but the offensive line was a big question last year. And now, while that was a question going into this year, they did a good job of addressing it with three capable starters for this team. So that shouldn't be an issue right off the bat. Also, they were able to bring in Mike Williams to kind of complement Garrett Wilson on the offensive side of the ball. The tight end spot is another one where I would have liked to have seen them add a little bit more talent, a little bit more of an established name. I'm not too sure who the tight end is right now, but I would have liked to have seen someone been added there. But Mike Williams, Garrett Wilson, along with Breece Hall, is not a bad combination whatsoever. Even still, they have Allen Lazard trying to bounce back from the season that he had last year. So they have a good group of playmakers there. Obviously, Garrett Wilson being highlighted the most out of all of those guys. But Mike Williams will be one. He should be active tonight. I haven't seen him on any injury reports or anything like that. The question just will be how much he will be playing after a very serious ACL injury. That'll be something to keep in mind. If he's on a snap count or anything like that, we'll keep an eye on that. Also, Mike Williams will be playing, but Hassan Reddick is probably not going to be playing, according to all the reports and all the news that have come out just today. Hassan Reddick, because of that, will be forfeiting an $800,000 game check for not playing in tonight's game. He is still holding true to his word and holding out from not getting that new contract extension for the Jets. It seems like he's not budging after, missing the entire offseason and now trickling into the regular season. It looks like Hassan Reddick is really going to bunker down and not going to show up until the Jets finally cave and give him that contract extension. I think that they should. And this game will either push him over the line to go and do it, or we're just going to be left in this gray area where Hassan's not doing anything. The Jets win tonight. If they win, they might not feel like they necessarily need Hassan Reddick right now, and they'll have no problem finding him again if he misses another game. So you don't want it to get to that, obviously, because then it just gets uglier and a lot more messy. So for right now, Hassan will not play in this game. He'll have to forfeit that check, obviously, and we'll see how much he will be missed tonight, obviously, because the 49ers offensive line is very good. Trent Williams on one side, and their entire offensive line has just been solid, at least since Brock Purdy has been their quarterback. And for the Jets, similar to that point, also sticking on the Jets, Bryce Huff, one of their leading sack leaders from a year ago. He is now gone. He is now on the Philadelphia Eagles, and we'll see if that has any impact, if Hassan will be more of a missing piece now that Bryce Huff is gone. Who's going to step up to kind of complement Quinnen Williams, Jeremiah Johnson, and all those guys to get a real pass rush going, because you can't have just Brock Purdy sitting back there for numerous seconds just finding any of his weapons that will get open if they are left open long enough. So that's going to be something that I will be looking at as well as the game goes on. Then moving on to the 49ers here a little bit, just talking about them and what they have to, address going into this game. No real missing pieces, just that we didn't know about already going into this game. Drake Greenlaw, he's going to be on IR for a couple weeks. Talanoa Hufanga could be playing. I haven't updated it yet on any injury reports. Last time I saw it, he was questionable at this morning. So throughout this segment, I will check on that to see if that changes. But for right now, he's questionable. He could be playing after missing the majority of last year with a serious injury that he suffered as well. Then, moving on from that, you have another person that's obviously going to be out is Ricky Pearsall with everything that happened and being shot and everything. He was put on not the injury reserve, but a different list, the non-injury related list that keeps him out for, I want to say 4 weeks as well, recovering from all of that, taking all the time that he needs, right? So he won't be playing in this game, obviously. So pretty much on top of that, we should have everybody else healthy and ready to go. Christian McCaffrey, Ayuk, and Trent should all be ready to go in tonight's matchup. Now that I'm looking at it, Talanoa Hufanga, the 49ers safety, is doubtful. He was downgraded a couple hours ago, so we probably won't see him in the secondary for the 49ers, which, they've been without him for a while now, so it doesn't change too much, but they would have loved to have him in there and be close to 100% as possible, but it doesn't look like he'll play. He has been downgraded to doubtful for tonight's game. And now, some more information before I get into the key matchups and factors into this game. Looking at Aaron Rodgers playing again against the 49ers, it's funny because the way these stats and random facts you see about some of these players, right? I saw something that Aaron Rodgers hasn't lost on Monday Night Football games since like 2012 or something like that. So that gives you some confidence, right? That maybe if you're trying to throw some money on this game or something, maybe the Jets is the way to go to kind of upset the 49ers here. But also, if you look at the last time Aaron Rodgers has played the 49ers, the last 2 playoff meetings, the 49ers have won, but the last 2 regular season meetings, Aaron Rodgers has won, but he was still with Green Bay, right? Now, obviously, with a different team. There could be some differing factors there, but Aaron Rodgers, in different circumstances, playoffs versus regular season, having very different results against the 49ers, so take that as you will. And also, the 49ers enter this new season with another new defensive coordinator, that being Nick Sorensen, with Brandon Staley, the old head coach of the 49ers, also on that coaching staff for Kyle Shanahan. And now, with all that basic information for you guys out of the way, now looking at the matchups I'm really interested in looking at to give us an idea of what to look for and kind of giving us a reason as to why one of these teams will win tonight. You look at the first one, Nick Bosa going up against Morgan Moses, and Leonard Floyd going up against Tyron Smith. The 2 new tackles for the Jets, playing in their first game together, obviously, going up against one of the best pass rushers in the league in Nick Bosa, and Leonard Floyd as well. How much pressure can these 2 guys apply to Aaron Rodgers? Because Aaron Rodgers, I'm a little weary of that Achilles just because I saw Kirk Cousins play on it yesterday, and there was a lot of formations, a lot of schemes where Kirk was pretty much in the pistol or in the shotgun formation a lot of the game, and they never said it was because he couldn't move or too much like that, but you can kind of connect the dots and realize that when you're in the shotgun, you're not really doing a lot of movement because you're not really too sure of that Achilles injury. So that's something I'll be looking at to see if they could apply any sort of pressure to Aaron Rodgers, how quickly Aaron's getting the ball out of his hand. That'll be something I'm looking forward to as well. Then just sticking on Aaron Rodgers, that matchup, Aaron Rodgers versus Fred Warner. I'm always interested when there's great quarterbacks going up against some of the best linebackers in the NFL, a la Ray Lewis, Peyton Manning, Ray Lewis, Tom Brady. We saw it on Thursday, Roquan Smith and Patrick Mahomes. All these guys going up against, their equal on the opposite side of the ball. How do they call their defense, their offense based on what they see, what they're anticipating, how they audible out of certain stuff. All of that is super fascinating to me, and I think it's going to be a great chess match between Rodgers and Fred Warner. Then, sticking to it, you have Sauce Gardner against Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. How do each of them fare against Sauce Gardner, and how well does the other one do when they're away from Sauce? And maybe they're targeted a little bit more. Maybe Brock Purdy still tries to test Sauce Gardner. How does that all work out for him? It'll be super interesting, and whether or not the 49ers can take advantage of the other defensive back opposite of Sauce Gardner and see if that's a weak point that they'd like to attack in this game. Then you look at some of the factors that I think will determine this game, which team can get the running game going with Breece Hall and Christian McCaffrey. I think, obviously, Christian McCaffrey established as, I think, the best running back in the NFL. But then you look at a guy like Breece Hall, a lot of executives and coaches are very high on him, believing he could be the next great running back. Which team can get their running game going, because it's going to be a huge determinant of who's controlling the pace, who's controlling, how long the opposing defense is out there on the field. With two great defenses like these, the running game is a huge advantage if you're able to get that going. So which one wins the matchup there? Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, how does their chemistry look going up against this 49ers secondary? Obviously, Garrett is the main target for Rodgers, and how do the 49ers kind of try to take him away from Aaron, force him to look at everybody else, and how successful is he in doing all of that? And lastly here, how well does Aaron Rodgers, again, move on that injured Achilles? We saw Kirk look a little bit uncomfortable, throw some bad passes, some bad interceptions because he had the pressure on top of him, not being able to escape. Does Aaron Rodgers face the same difficulties, similar injuries from a year ago? That will be something huge to look at. But in terms of my predictions, I feel like I'm already, I think, 1-1 in these scenarios, right? I picked the Chiefs because they had less to figure out. I picked the Packers in the next game because they also had less to figure out. And now I still want to go with the 49ers because, again, they have less to figure out. They know who they are. They have the exact same team coming over from a year ago, give or take a few players. They know who they are. They know what they're trying to get to. They know their weaknesses, their strong points. They have a lot more figured out than I think the Jets do, traveling across the country as well. I feel like it's a lot to just throw out there for their first game. Aaron Rodgers, a tough opponent, coming off of a year-long reserve, being on the bench, being injured. I think all of that stuff stacks up against you, and I think the 49ers would just be a little bit more comfortable in tonight's game to get to their stuff, execute on it, and I wouldn't be surprised if they win this game. I'm going to say 23 to 14, the 49ers will win off of this game, off of the 49ers. The Jets trying to still get everything to going. I like the 49ers in tonight's matchup, so if you're betting on it or anything like that, if you want to take my advice, I think the 49ers will win tonight's matchup, but that is set to kick off in about just over an hour from now, so we'll get to that after tonight's show. But moving on to a different topic, now after this upcoming break, we're going to talk about some of the storylines from this past Sunday, specifically on the AFC North. A lot of the teams, most of the teams falling to 0-1. One team leading the division, 1-0. And what do we make of the disappointing performances from the Browns, the Bengals, not so much the Ravens, and not so much the Steelers? We're going to get into dissecting that division a little bit more after this break. We'll be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast with some breaking news. After we just finished talking about the 49ers and the matchup between Breece Hall and Christian McCaffrey, of course, we got this latest report from Ian Rappaport, Mike Garafolo, saying the following: the 49ers star running back Christian McCaffrey, calf/Achilles injury, will not play in San Francisco's game tonight against the Jets. So apparently not all good with Christian McCaffrey. He will not play in tonight's game. Huge determinant. Does that change my pick? It almost does. No, I'm going to stick to my pick. I'm still going to say the 49ers win. I'm going to stick to it now. Obviously, huge loss there for the 49ers, but it's just going to make it closer. I think the 49ers will still squeak out of this with a win. But that's the last we'll talk about that game, just set to kick off in an hour or so now. The next topic we'll get to will be what happened in the AFC North. The Steelers, of all teams, right? The probably favorites to finish last among a lot of people in this division, actually are the only team to have a winning record in the AFC North after the first Sunday of the year. It didn't give a good first impression, I think, for the rest of this division, because I've been on here multiple times saying that this is one of the tougher divisions in football. They're a contender for honestly having at least 3 teams in the playoffs each year. But the first week, very short sample size, I do know. But regardless of that, not leaving a good taste in a lot of people's mouths after Sunday especially, because I wouldn't say Baltimore, gave off a bad impression. There were certainly some question marks and some doubts after that game, even though they were only a play away from potentially winning that game. I don't think people were left too upset by what they saw from Baltimore, and even the Steelers, right? With all the craziness of who was starting and who wasn't before kickoff. They got the win. They didn't score any touchdowns. There was 6 field goals by Chris Boswell, but they're in the win column nonetheless. It was really the 2 teams from Ohio that disappointed on Sunday. For the Bengals and the Browns, just very disappointing on the offensive side of the ball, right? Both of them were very poor, very flat on the offensive side of the ball, just a lot of sloppy plays, and it just looked like they needed more time. Like the preseason obviously wasn't enough, and we know how the preseason goes, right? Not everybody plays, hardly anybody plays, but apart from that, you still would have liked to have seen more from both of these teams, because we're talking about the Browns, who have a great defense. They were in the playoffs last year. They lost to the Houston Texans ultimately, but there was still that hope with Deshaun Watson, and we're going to get to Deshaun Watson more in this segment, but even more so later on in the show. But they just fell flat to the Cowboys. They just never looked comfortable in that matchup. And also for the Bengals, on the offensive side of the ball, you have Burrow, you have Jamar Chase, depending on how much he played in that game. You didn't have T. Higgins, but even still, you're not going to lose to the New England Patriots, who were underdogs in every single one of their games this year. To lose at home, especially the way that they did, really raised some alarm bells, at least for me. And we're going to stick with the Bengals, right? Because the Bengals couldn't avoid a massive upset to the New England Patriots. Obviously, they entered that game as 7.5 favorites. The Patriots were 7.5 underdogs, obviously. And with them beating the Cincinnati Bengals, it was the biggest upset in terms of point differential in the last 6 years. And especially if you just look at the state and the narrative around both teams, right? You look at the Bengals, considered right off of the bat, just based on the fact that they have Joe Burrow, already one of the contenders to be in the AFC Championship game, right? And same thing, you look at the Patriots, nowhere near the narrative of the Cincinnati Bengals. They're considered one of the worst teams in the NFL, right? A contender for one of the top picks in the draft again. But all of that flew out the window, and the Patriots really just took it to the Cincinnati Bengals in this game. Again, no T. Higgins, but Jamar Chase was out there with Joe Burrow, but it just, again, didn't look as clean and as smooth as it has looked in the past. And you could chalk that up to the lack of snaps in the offseason and in training camp or something like that. I'm sure a lot of people will, but Joe Burrow said that that really didn't hold too much weight with him and his teammates in the locker room. So depending on what went wrong for the Cincinnati Bengals in that game, you look back to last year even, and it's starting to become a little bit of a trend here for the 49ers, because if you look here, you look at Joe Burrow in week 1 of last year in 2023 and Joe Burrow in week 1 of this year, and how the numbers aren't really great at all. Just looking at it from last year, right? You look at that 2023 game against the Cleveland Browns, funny enough, he was 14 of 31, only 82 yards in that game, and they only scored 3 points. They got absolutely smacked in that game against the Browns. And then this year, a little bit better in terms of yards, but 21 of 26, not too many misses, but you weren't really too, I guess, efficient with the ball to move it. In terms of putting points up on the board, right, you're completing a lot of passes, but how impactful is that really towards putting up some more points? Really similar stories in both years, just from last year against the Browns, now into this year against the New England Patriots at home again. That's back-to-back years now where Joe Burrow hasn't looked great in the start of the year, at least for the first games. And now, usually, it just comes down to the fact if Joe does end up finishing out the year healthy. If he does that, he's been in the AFC Conference game every time he's been able to stay healthy. So the start not being too much of an impact as much as the end, but still, it's not a great look, right? With all the anticipation coming into this year and just looking at this week, just week 1, you look at the Bengals and just how they just didn't lose to any team, right? They lost to the Patriots, new head coach, new quarterback, and new everything basically. And they looked like the team that maybe were contending for their division, right? It looked like the roles were reversed in some aspect, but does this mean I'm writing off the Bengals completely, that they have no chance? No, but it was just a very big surprise just based on week 1. Very surprising result and a very disappointing one for the Bengals that, again, have a lot more to figure out, it looks like, because not only was it the offense, but you look at the running game for both teams as well. The Cincinnati run game was pretty pedestrian. You only had Zach Moss run for 44 yards, and while they couldn't get anything going in the run game, the Patriots, on the other hand, were all about the run. Ramondre Stevenson putting up 120 rushing yards, scoring a touchdown, and all of that. It makes a big difference. And my overall impression from the Cincinnati Bengals and just their performance in the first week of the season is that Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins will pretty much have to be perfect, or will pretty much have to be every aspect and every dimension of this offense for the Bengals to be considered a great offense. I think those 3 guys are going to have a lot of weight on their shoulders based on that. And also, the loss of Joe Mixon is looking a lot more impactful than I think a lot of people anticipated. A lot of people just overlooked it. Like, Joe Mixon, yeah, he left, but they still have Joe Burrow and they still have Jamar Chase. I think losing Joe Mixon is going to turn out to be a lot more significant than a lot of people realize just based on that fact. You have to have a good running game, especially in this division where if you become one-dimensional like we saw with the Browns, it becomes a lot harder on your quarterback, especially if the offensive line isn't too great like the Bengals is. So speaking of Cleveland, they're also not they're not saving themselves from any sort of judgment or criticism as well. They lost at home 33-17 to the Cowboys. Their offense gave their defense no help in either time or putting up any sort of points. Just really a one-sided defense of their home field from their defense on that side. A great defense, but every great defense can only go so much time on the field before you obviously get tired, start rotating people in, or you get trapped out there on the field because the other team is running hurry-up offense and you can't make subs. So really no compensation, no compliment from the offense in this game for the Browns. The offensive line, was something that I think a lot of people will point out to. Like, they were missing two of their tackles, their two starting tackles they were without for this game. But you look at the other side of the ball, the Cowboys were starting two rookies on their offensive line, and it looked like Dak Prescott was hardly ever touched in that game. So to use that excuse, I don't really buy it, and I don't really hold too much weight towards that, just because you look at both teams, right? Great defenses. One has Myles Garrett, one has Micah Parsons, Trayvon Diggs, Denzel Ward. Same thing to Darius Smith, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Both defenses have great guys, right? So it's not really a differentiation point to make there. On the offensive side of the ball, you look at Amari Cooper. One has CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks. The other has Jerry Jeudy, Jerome Ford, Ezekiel Elliott, Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson. The offensive line, same thing, missing two pieces. One is starting two rookies. The other is starting two backups. What's the difference going to be in this game? A lot of it just falls to the quarterbacks, who rises to the challenge. And I think Dak Prescott did that more so than Deshaun Watson. And I'm going to mention Deshaun, just the fact that he had 169 yards, 2 interceptions, and 1 touchdown. He stole the show, basically, or made all the headlines just on his stat line and the way that he played. He was sacked numerous times and just really had no positive plays from beginning to the end of this game. Really, it looked like Deshaun Watson just clogged up the rhythm of this offense, the execution of everything, the poor placement on some of the throws, the miscommunications, the hesitation a lot of the times, and also just bad reads, bad decision-making a lot of the times in this game. A lot of credit goes to the Dallas defense, but not too much. Like this team, this Browns team, is good enough to compete, I think, with anybody in terms of going one by one for the rosters. And the only difference from last year to this year is the quarterback, unfortunately. So I think it amplifies it even more now with Deshaun playing like this in his third year in Cleveland. It comes to a point now where these fans are starting to get a little bit impatient, and you can't keep using the excuse of, oh, he's dealing with injuries, or he's dealing with the suspension and everything like that. He's still trying to adjust. Like, all of that is starting to just become over repetitive at this point, and Deshaun and this Cleveland team really didn't make a great impression at all in their first game at home. Again, we're not writing off anybody, but just based on the first week, it hasn't looked too positive for either of these two teams. And I didn't even get to the Steelers, but I think really just for the whole AFC North to kind of pan out this way, for the Bengals and the Browns to put up goose eggs as they did, I think that pretty much writes the whole story about this division. Like, the Steelers are sitting first in this division where everybody probably thought they were going to be last. The Ravens also 0-1. This division is so unpredictable, and the fact that the Steelers don't play any division games until after week 11 or something like that, there's no predicting on how this division will go, and that's what makes it one of the best in my opinion. So very unexpected start for this year for that division, and I feel like it's only going to get better from here, a lot more unpredictable. So hopefully that is the case for the AFC North, but we will continue on with more on this show. We're going to talk about more on this topic, more on the Browns and the Dallas Cowboys game, answering the question of whether or not the Cowboys impressed me more with the way that they won this game, or whether or not I was more disappointed in how Cleveland played, and specifically how Deshaun Watson disappointed in this matchup. We'll be right back with that topic and answering that question after this break. Don't go anywhere.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Thank you for joining us back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. And a continuation of the last segment in this segment now, answering more questions on this Cowboys and Browns game that we saw just yesterday. Dallas defeating the Browns 33-17 in comfortable fashion yesterday. A well-rounded win with really everyone chipping in. Like I said in the last segment, it's not like Dak carried the Cowboys or anything like that. It's not like CeeDee Lamb had an amazing game for his standards. Also, the defense played great, but it's not like they had pick sixes or anything like that or forced fumbles or anything like that. They had 2 interceptions, but still 33-17 I think was pretty flattering for the Cleveland Browns in this game. And I'll even chalk it up to some of the coaching, the game planning around this game for the Dallas Cowboys and how well they executed on everything. It looked like everything went exactly how they planned it. Dak hardly ever facing any struggle or stress in the game. He looked very much in tune with everything. Every throw was supposed to go where it needed to go, when it needed to go there. So huge credit to the Cowboys, and very impressed with them because, like I said before, I thought they were going to lose this game, and I was expecting more out of the Cleveland Browns, and that's where my answer sort of lies with this question, right? More impressed with the Cowboys or disappointed with the Browns? And just because I picked the Browns to win this game and thinking that Deshaun Watson was going to show us a little bit more, it has to be more that I'm disappointed with the Browns than I am with the Dallas Cowboys, more than I am impressed with the Cowboys because, it is a good win. I don't want to diminish the efforts that the Cowboys put into this game, right, with all the distractions, leaving everything to last minute. This was a good win for them, a good road win for one of their tougher road wins that they're going to have on their schedule. But, the Browns just like putting up the display that they did, and especially at the quarterback position, everything in the NFL lives and dies pretty much with the quarterback spot, right? Anything regarding a good team, a bad team, you could look at their quarterback and, find a lot of answers in how that quarterback is playing. They get the most amount of money. They're the stars of the entire league pretty much. The quarterback is exponentially so important to every team, and once they play good, that's when they're hyped up a lot, right? That's when you hear a lot about Tua or Trevor or some of these other guys that might have a great game. It's amplified even more because it's the quarterback performance on top of who they are, how well that they played and everything like that. But also on the flip side of that, once they play bad, it's the end of the world, right? It's everything that you don't hope to happen with your franchise, especially with an organization like the Browns who have been longing for a quarterback, like they thought they were getting in Deshaun Watson, and then to have it all play out in this way after 3 years or now entering year 3, there's a lot of concerns now, a lot of concerns around Deshaun Watson, and the story with this game obviously goes to the quarterbacks who would perform better to start the year. Both of these quarterbacks were facing a lot of pressure with Dak and the contract and everything like that, and just being the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. And Deshaun, trying in any way possible to show everybody that, the last 2 years, there was a lot of troubles. There was a lot of things that he went through with the suspensions and the injuries and stuff like that. You really wanted to put that in the past, but again, now that the team says that you're healthy, you're fully ready to go, that shoulder's not bothering you, you still put up a disappointing performance like this. Now we're starting to run out of excuses, right? We're starting to run out of time, really, for Deshaun Watson. More and more, I think people are starting to realize that this Houston version of Deshaun might, start to lose a little bit of steam here as we go over the rest of this year. You hope that it's still in there. You hope to see it at some point, but you're starting to become less and less confident that is going to happen. And ultimately, it came down to how both of them played in this game. Because Dak, like I said before, was cool, calm, orchestrated a lot of the offense, executed everything very well. And, on the other side, Deshaun Watson was evidently not that, because some of the throws were just, like I said, late, inaccurate, or just not deciding on the right throw to make at that time. There was a lot of just questionable throws, I will say, for a lack of a better terms, questionable throws, decision-making, and everything like that, holding onto the ball a little bit too long goes along those lines, right? You make a couple of bad throws, then the next throw, it looks like it's there, but you don't want to make another mistake. You roll out, you're still looking for options, but that might have been your only one, and now you're out of options, and you either take that sack like he did in 6 occasions yesterday, or you throw up a bad pass and have the risk of it being intercepted, right? That all comes with the doubt, the couple of inaccurate throws, messing up your rhythm, and now the quarterback, Deshaun Watson, is a little bit lost, and it becomes evident, like I said, when everything is pretty much even. It's an even playing field everywhere on both of these teams except the quarterback positions, right? That's why you pay these two guys, funny enough, the most guaranteed money in NFL history, originally held by Deshaun Watson, and now it becomes Dak Prescott with his new extension. One of them already, after one game, already pretty much is giving you more hope that they're going to live up to that contract over Deshaun Watson that has been on this contract for the last couple of years, but has yet to shown us that, that was a good investment. And not only the money, right, because the money is what it is now. It's going to go to Deshaun either way, but you look at the picks and everything that they had to give up, how Houston turned all of those picks, all of that draft capital into their juggernaut of the team that they have now. And it makes you look back on that trade and, calling it the worst trade of all time. I feel like I hear that term every year with some of these blockbuster deals, but it's certainly going to be up there. With that being said, I hear it a lot. It's thrown out a lot, but this trade, now looking back on it in hindsight and how, it has all turned out, all of that isn't playing and it isn't doing Deshaun Watson any favors right now. And this game wasn't as close as the score sort of suggested there. Also, everything or most of what Deshaun Watson ran each play out of the pistol or shotgun, meaning that it was all pretty much easier for Dallas to get to him. Like we said with Kirk, like we alluded to a little bit with Aaron Rodgers, a lot of the sets for Cleveland and Deshaun Watson were held out of the pistol or shotgun formation and everything like that. So it's not like they were doing too much to kind of help Deshaun Watson out a little bit. And that's where I'll cut him some slack, where you can't just keep running everything out of the same formation, especially against a good defense just in general, but also a good defensive coach in Mike Zimmer. If you see that throughout the entire game, throughout an entire half or anything like that, and you don't include any play actions or bootlegs or anything like that, or some formations out of center, like right behind the center, it becomes easier for their pass rushers to just come and have a free shot at you, have your offensive line be in constant one-on-one matchups, and it has no real creativity to kind of keep the defense on their toes. Everyone is playing up to their man, making sure that Deshaun tries to throw it quickly, because if he doesn't, that pass rush is going to get to him either way, and that's what comes with the bad decisions, the hurried throws, the inaccurate throws, and then you're second-guessing everything, right? And it was just a sloppy game overall from the Browns and Deshaun Watson. And also, what was crazy, and I saw this on ESPN this morning, for all the plays that they had, the Cleveland Browns, 43% of all of their plays were either no gains or negative gains. And I don't know how many plays exactly there are in an NFL game. I can't even throw out a random number because I don't know exactly how accurate it'll be. But to have almost 50% of it be negative or just gain no yards, again, it shows that 33-17, super flattering, because if half of your plays are staying right where you are or you're losing yards, like, there's no, like, what are we even talking about in that sense, talking about the Browns against a great team, great defense, I'll say, with the Dallas Cowboys, with some great players like Micah, DeMarcus Lawrence, Trayvon Diggs on there, a good defensive coordinator in Mike Zimmer. If they're not even worried, or they're doing so well that you're not even gaining any yards on half of your plays, it's insane to think about. And I think that really reflects the dominance that we saw in this game from the Cowboys and or over the Cleveland Browns. And the run game even looked good with Ezekiel Elliott, but we're not going to overreact to just that aspect. Again, I think the Cowboys did a good job in the run game. Dak did a good job of orchestrating everything. Dallas did surprise me, I'll admit that, on offense and defense. And the character of this team to not only win, but go on the road against the top defense and just shut out the noise, finally get everything done. Like Jerry Jones said, to his credit, everything would get done. And, still win, put up 30-something points on this team. That is great for them. I was surprised in that aspect, but still, I would just say I'm more disappointed by the Browns just because the belief with Cleveland is that they have a championship roster, but Deshaun Watson is becoming the clear disconnect from what we saw last year in the second half of the year to what we're seeing right now. And people are just going to be calling more and more as the games, sort of play out. I don't know who they're playing next week, but I know some of their games are against the Raiders, the Giants, and some other team along the next couple of weeks. And you have some hope there that it will get better, right? The Raiders just lost, the Giants just lost, but if it doesn't get any better, people are going to start calling for something to be done about Deshaun Watson and this team because of the fact that they just saw Joe Flacco walk in basically and make this team unrecognizable from last year to this year, and the only thing that changed was the quarterback. There only comes so much time before everyone starts pointing out the obvious, and what happens to Deshaun Watson after that still remains a huge question, but that's still a long ways away. As the weeks go on, maybe the Browns change something about their offense or anything like that to try and help out Deshaun, but right now it wasn't a great opening game for the Browns and Deshaun Watson. That's why I'm very much disappointed more so in the Browns than I am with the Dallas Cowboys and impressed with the way that they won this game. But that is already in the past. And speaking of a game that's in the past, we were so caught up in everything over Sunday. A lot more things that I could have talked about, but I had to bring up Friday's game, right? The first ever game in Brazil, Saquon Barkley dominating in that game against a very keen Packers team. I wanted to review that game, talk about Saquon dominating in that game overall, and just my thoughts from it. It was a great game back and forth, so we're going to review that game in its totality for this last segment. We'll be right back after this break. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. I had to go back to last Friday and talk about the game that we obviously didn't get a chance to go over because on Friday, we signed off and everything, and then we all watched the Packers and Eagles game that was one of the better games in all of Week 1, just having two great competitive teams, two of the NFC contenders this year, in my opinion, go at it, and it didn't disappoint. This game had a lot to talk about, but Saquon helping the Philadelphia Eagles to a 34-29 victory over the Packers was really the main storyline. Obviously, with the Eagles winning this game, it all starts and ends with Saquon Barkley, right? But with that being said, it was a rough start for the Eagles, but, having Saquon on their team, you only felt that it was only a matter of time before something broke through, whether it was the passing game or Saquon getting more involved. Something had to happen because they were too talented for it to start off the way that they did, right? With Jalen Hurts struggling a couple times to start the game. You look at the interception that he threw to Xavier McKinney, just a bad decision to throw it, just chuck it up into the middle of the field to Devontae Smith, surrounded by three guys. Then there was that bad exchange with Cam Jurgens and the snap. They ended up losing that football as well, and you're starting to think that some of these problems with Jalen not having Jason Kelce there, obviously as the center, you're starting to have a little bit more doubts about this team. But then they started to settle in, and I think rightly so. They started depending on their running game and using the entire offensive line, right? Because that offensive line still continues to be one of the best in the NFL. After losing Jason Kelce, like I said, they moved over to Mekhi Becton to fill in that right guard spot as Cam Jurgens moved over one spot to be the starting center now. And it looked like they didn't miss a step, right? And from that point on, once they kind of settled in and realized that Saquon Barkley might be more often than not the guy that they have to go through to sort of establish any sort of rhythm, identity, or impose their will on any game, I think they're going to have to start with Saquon Barkley. And he made a big point in this game, like I said, because you look at the stats and how he finished this game and how impactful he was just from start to finish. You look at the numbers just on your screen there against the Green Bay Packers. He had 109 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 23 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown, right, to cap off his hat trick of touchdowns, tying a Philadelphia record with 3 touchdowns in his debut. Terrell Owens did it back in 2004, and now, 20 years later, an equally as talented player does it for the Philadelphia Eagles again. And overall, I feel like you look at these numbers, and I feel like this is just a ballpark idea of what Saquon's ceiling can be with this Eagles team, because the thought that Philadelphia realized that as the game went on that he should be what this offense is based around, because he is that good of a player. As good as A.J. Brown is, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, even Jalen Hurts, I think Saquon, again playing the position that he plays, running back, having that sort of talent at that position, you see it with Christian McCaffrey and the 49ers, right? The 49ers were a good team before Christian went over there, but once Christian ended up on that team, they reached a whole nother level that I think a lot of people didn't think was even possible with how good they were already. And I think we're starting to see that same thing here with Saquon and the Eagles, because as good as they were last year, like the Eagles were 10-1 last year at some point, then you add Saquon Barkley now to this year, not only are they going to be just impossible to stop on the defensive side of the ball, but really most of all, I think it's going to help Jalen Hurts overall, just not having to throw the ball so much or really find himself in difficult spots where he's trying to force it. He's trying to make tough decisions just by extending plays, and then everything gets all messed up, and you're in 3rd and longs, 2nd and longs, and things like that. Having Saquon paired up with that offensive line is going to make these situations that they face a lot easier. Saquon is going to benefit, obviously, from it because he's playing around a lot of talented guys, so you can't really stack the box against him. And if you do, it's just going to be easier throws for Jalen Hurts, and that's where I'm going with all of this, right? As much as Saquon is benefiting from it, Jalen's going to benefit from it, helping him rebound from the year that he had last year. And that's what makes this entire plan by Howie Roseman to go out and get Saquon Barkley, steal him from the New York Giants, I think, genius. And now it's going to help out so much. And to just talk about this game a little bit more in its totality, you look at 34-29 and you're thinking, wow, there was no defense in this game at all. But a big difference maker to me was the fact that Philadelphia's defense really shut everything down around the red zone when Green Bay made it there on slow, methodical drives, right? They scored a lot of plays on some just long passes, some blown coverages, if you will. They had a lot of explosive plays, right? But a lot of times when they had these long drives, they had something going, started building some momentum. They only got so far until the Eagles kind of put a roadblock in between their drive, and the Packers really struggled to get a lot of their red zone possessions into the end zone, really, at the end of the day. I thought the Eagles did a great job of that, bunkering down in the red zone, holding Green Bay to multiple field goals where if they score one or two of those touchdowns, it's a different game potentially. So I was very impressed by that. Whereas, the Philadelphia Eagles defensive line, was better in the red zone than I thought they were going to be. And you look at how the Eagles defense kind of stifled the Packers offense in the red zone. You look at the other side of that, and when the Eagles made it to the red zone, they did struggle with getting the ball into the end zone. Obviously, a lot of times last year and even the year before that, their red zone percentages weren't that great. Now, going back to Saquon, having a guy like him making these red zone trips a lot easier because you're able to run it with him, and he's able to break a couple tackles. We saw one of them when he was in the red zone. A linebacker broke through. I forget who it was. It might have been Quay Walker. He broke through. Saquon just gave him a little move at the line of scrimmage. He went flying by, and there was a straight lane to the end zone just 20 yards out. And that's the sort of playmaking, difference-making that you have with Saquon in the red zone. You're able to run it in with him. You can always do the tush-push with Jalen Hurts when you're close enough. You got a guy that squats 500 pounds and another guy that squats 600 pounds. There's no way they're not going to get any front moving force out of those two guys, and that just makes it a lot easier, and that really showed up in the difference in how efficient each team was in the red zone, in large part, again, going back to Saquon Barkley and his running ability as well. The Eagles defense looked more refined up front than I originally thought. Zach Bond, we talked about it in the preview, how Devin White wasn't going to play and how the linebackers were going to do without Devin White in there. Zach Bond really stepped up in this matchup, making a lot of tackles, good in coverage as well, complimenting Nakobe Dean. Now once they have Devin White back, they have three very capable linebackers that I'm feeling more and more secure with as I watched that game on Friday. There were some miscommunications that will ultimately be fixed, but you saw it on some of the broken coverages, right, that there was just some miscommunications or a lack of communication on some of those. So those could be easily fixed. And I expect Jalen Hurts to cut down on the reckless plays. Just, again, going back to the point about Saquon, that with Saquon leading the way, and I think ultimately becoming the more significant and vital piece of this offense, I think it'll limit Jalen Hurts from throwing and finding himself in these bad situations where he's just chucking it up to A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. He's going to find himself in a lot more third and shorts, second and shorts, and maybe not even getting the third downs, right? Or using the tush push even less. So all of that is going to help Jalen Hurts even more, helping him rebound from last year not playing so well. And that's all the positive I had for the Eagles. Unfortunately for the Packers, you look at the fact that they lost this game, right? It was a bummer, but not as big of a loss as they are going to have with their quarterback now, Jordan Love, being out for 3 to 6 weeks with an MCL sprain. Malik Willis is reported to now be the starter for them after just being traded there a couple weeks from the Tennessee Titans. He's going to start for them now going forward for the next month or so, month and a half or so, give or take. And it's obviously unfortunate for the Packers, and it sinks my prediction, I think, of them winning the division. Not just because I don't think they could come back or anything like that, but Detroit looked really good last night in the Sunday Night Football game against the Rams. So with Jordan Love now missing a month and a half, Malik Willis hasn't looked too hot. My prediction of the Packers winning this division doesn't look so hot right now. So apart from that, thinking bigger picture, you look at the upcoming schedule for the Packers and who they'll have to play. In week 2, they'll be at home against the Colts. So it's not a toss-up by any means with how good Anthony Richardson played. So, that could go either way. Week 3, they're at Tennessee, and I know Tennessee just lost in a bad way to the Bears, but they also did some good things in that game, so that's also another close game potentially. Week 4, you're at home against the Vikings, and even though they played the Giants and they looked pretty dominant, Sam Darnold looked pretty decent. You have to deal with Justin Jefferson on that side, also Jordan Addison as well. Aaron Jones looked great as well. And on the defense side of the ball, they did pretty well for themselves. Again, albeit against the Giants. They did make some good plays and made it hard for the Giants as well. So that's anything less than, that's definitely not going to be a gimme. Week 5 against the Rams, they were just in a close game with the Lions. I would probably favor the Rams at home. Week 6 against the Cardinals at home, that could be around when Jordan Love could be back. You'd hope so, because then in Week 7, you play at home against the Houston Texans, and you're definitely going to need Jordan Love for that game. So it becomes a little bit more tricky now for this Packers offense with Jordan Love now being out for a month and a half. Can they ride the ship here a little bit and avoid themselves from sinking and falling too far behind the Lions in the playoff race, or in the divisional race, I should say, not the playoff race? But yeah, the Eagles look great. The Packers didn't look bad, but just very unfortunate that Jordan Love got hurt in just the final seconds of that game. You never like to see that. But with that being said, that'll do it for today's show. That'll wrap it up on today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. Check out more content around this show on both YouTube channels, finding more content around the NFL, more storylines, in a variety of different ways. And also, reminder to tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time to talk about some more football now that the regular season is upon us. More storylines, more breaking news with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you for joining me. Go out and go watch the Jets and 49ers game set to kick off in just about 40 minutes. Thank you guys for joining me, and I hope to see you guys back here again tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.